Maya Angelou was an American writer, poet, performer, and civil rights activist whose work helped reshape modern American memoir and broaden the audience for contemporary poetry. She is best known for her first autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, along with poems such as Still I Rise and Phenomenal Woman. Her public life moved through classrooms, nightclubs, civil rights organizing, international journalism, and university teaching, and she became one of the most recognized literary voices of the late 20th century. She was born Marguerite Annie Johnson on April 4, 1928, in St. Louis, Missouri. As a young child, she and her brother Bailey were sent to Stamps, Arkansas, to live with their paternal grandmother. Angelou later wrote about Stamps as a town shaped by segregation and limited opportunity, but also by close community ties, church life, and the day-to-day discipline of work. Her grandmother ran a general store, and the store became a central setting in Angelou's memories of childhood because it brought her into constant contact with local people and local speech. Her childhood included severe trauma. After returning to St. Louis, she was sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend. After she reported the abuse, the man was later killed. As a child, she believed her words had caused his death, and she stopped speaking for several years. This long silence is one of the most important parts of her life story because it shaped her relationship to language. During that period, she read widely and listened closely. A family friend and teacher, Bertha Flowers, helped guide her back to speaking by encouraging her to read literature aloud and by treating her intelligence with respect. Angelou later described this as a turning point in her understanding of the power of words and the discipline needed to use them well. In her teens, she moved to San Francisco to live with her mother. During World War II, she became a streetcar conductor, often described as one of the first Black women in San Francisco to hold that position. The job mattered because it placed her inside a public system that was not always welcoming, and it required persistence, regularity, and public-facing professionalism. Around the same period, she continued her education and pursued training in dance and drama. At 16, she became a mother. Her son, Guy, was born in 1944. Angelou later wrote honestly about the pressures of raising a child while still very young and still trying to build stability. Angelou's early adult years included performance work that developed her stage confidence and her sense of rhythm and delivery. She trained as a dancer and singer and performed in clubs and theaters. She adopted the name Maya Angelou, drawing from a childhood nickname and a version of a surname from a past marriage. In the 1950s, she toured internationally with a production of Porgy and Bess, which took her to Europe and parts of Africa. She also recorded music and appeared in film and stage projects. These years are sometimes treated as a preface to her writing career, but they mattered on their own. They gave her technical skills, especially in timing and voice, that later shaped the way she wrote scenes and the way she read her poems aloud. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, Angelou's work increasingly connected with politics and civil rights activism. She moved to New York City and became involved with writers and organizers in Harlem, including the Harlem Writers Guild. She worked with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and served as Northern Coordinator, which placed her in the orbit of Martin Luther King Jr. and major campaigns of the era. Later, she worked with Malcolm X, who encouraged her involvement with the Organization of Afro-American Unity. These relationships are often summarized quickly, but the practical reality behind them included fundraising, event planning, communication, and the emotional toll of working in a period of constant threat and instability. Angelou experienced deep grief after the assassinations of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., events that affected her personally as well as politically. In the early 1960s, Angelou lived abroad, first in Cairo and later in Accra, Ghana. In Egypt, she worked in journalism and editing. In Ghana, she wrote and edited, taught and connected with a community of Black expatriates who were studying post-colonial politics and questions of identity. Those years widened her perspective and gave her experience working as a writer in professional settings outside the United States. They also placed her in contact with visitors and public figures who moved through West Africa during that period. Her time abroad later became a major component of her autobiographical series. When Angelou returned to the United States in the late 1960s, writer James Baldwin and editor Robert Loomis encouraged her to write her life story. The result was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, published in 1969. The book stood out for its literary craft and its directness. She wrote about childhood in the segregated South, the trauma of sexual abuse, the years of silence, and the complicated process of becoming a young woman with agency. The memoir reached a wide audience and became a landmark in American literature, especially because it expanded what mainstream publishing expected a Black woman's life story to look like in both content and style. Caged Bird was the first volume in a series of autobiographical books. Over the following decades, Angelou continued her story through additional memoirs, including Gather Together in My Name, Singin' and Swingin', and Gettin' Merry. Like Christmas, The Heart of a Woman, and All God's Children Need Traveling Shoes. These books do not repeat the same moment from different angles. They move forward, showing her choices and consequences across different phases of adulthood. Taken together, the series creates a long-form portrait of a life in motion, including ambition, mistakes, work, reinvention, and growth. Her background as a performer is visible in the writing. She builds scenes with strong dialogue and sharp character detail, and she writes with a sense of pacing that keeps the narrative moving. Alongside memoir, Angelou built a major poetry career. Her first major poetry collection, Just Give Me a Cool Drink of Water 'Fore I Die, was published in 1971 and received significant recognition. Poems such as Still I Rise and Phenomenal Woman became widely circulated and frequently performed. Her poetry often uses direct address and strong rhythm, drawing on oral tradition, church cadence, blues, and everyday speech. The tone is often confident and clear, and she frequently writes about resilience, dignity, beauty, and the pressure of living under racial and gendered expectation. Part of her influence came from the way she made poetry feel accessible to people who did not consider themselves poetry readers without flattening the ideas. Angelou also wrote for screen and stage. She wrote the screenplay for the film Georgia, Georgia, released in 1972, which is often noted as a historic first for a Black woman in Hollywood screenwriting. She appeared as an actor in several projects and was part of the television miniseries Roots, which became a major cultural event. These projects reinforced her identity as a multi-format storyteller who could move between page and performance. In 1993, Angelou reached one of the largest audiences of her career when she read her poem On the Pulse of Morning at the presidential inauguration of Bill Clinton. The event placed a living poet at the center of a major national ceremony watched by millions. The poem emphasized shared responsibility and the possibility of a more inclusive future. The inauguration reading increased her visibility, boosted sales of her books, and introduced her voice to many people who had not encountered her writing before. For many years, Angelou taught and mentored students, most notably at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, where she held the title of Reynolds Professor of American Studies. Her teaching reputation emphasized discipline and seriousness about craft, along with generosity toward students willing to do the work. She also gave a large number of public talks, speaking about literature, history, ethics, and the responsibilities of citizenship. Her honors were extensive. She received multiple Grammy Awards for spoken word recordings and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2010. She also received numerous honorary degrees and major institutional recognition. These awards reflected both the literary impact of her books and the broader public role she came to play as a cultural voice. Maya Angelou died on May 28, 2014, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Her death prompted tributes from writers, educators, political leaders, and readers around the world. Her work remains widely taught in schools and universities, and her poems and memoirs continue to influence how people think about identity, survival, and the role of language in shaping a life. If you are looking for a straightforward summary of why her work lasts, it comes down to three things. First, she expanded the modern memoir by showing that a personal life story could be written with high literary craft while still being direct and readable. Second, she helped bring poetry to broader audiences through performance and plain-spoken power. Third, she lived as a working artist across many mediums and showed that the skills of voice, timing, and discipline can carry from the stage to the page and back again.
To travel that long